Hello and welcome. Thank you for joining us. This is from the CBN. I'm Misi Dada. The much anticipated two-day statutory meeting of the CBN Monetary Policy Committee held earlier this week in the middle of dampened optimism for improvements in global output recovery associated with the second wave of the COVID-19 pandemic. 10 members were in attendance, and today we'll bring to you all the issues raised at the meeting, particularly during the question and answer session of the MPC press briefing. But first, here are the top stories from the Central Bank of Nigeria this week. The Monetary Policy Committee of the Central Bank of Nigeria Tuesday voted unanimously to leave monetary policy rate at 11.5% along with other key policy parameters. CBN Governor Mr. Godwin Emefiele, who announced the committee's decision at the end of its two-day meeting in Abuja, noted that overall the medium-term outlook for both the domestic and global economies continues to show improved prospects of recovery.
While expressing understanding of the public health dilemma of the recent spike in infections, MPC encouraged government not to consider a wholesome lockdown of the Nigerian economy so as not to reverse the current gains of the stimulus earlier provided in 2020. It also encouraged the Central Bank of Nigeria management to aggressively intensify its efforts in providing targeted credit facility to households, to small and medium enterprises, to the health sector, as well as the agri and manufacturing sectors, which would not only boost consumer spending, but result in manufacturing output, thereby positively impacting the GDP. On this basis, the MPC agreed to hold all policy parameters constant. The committee thus decided, by a unanimous vote, to retain the monetary policy rate at 11.5%. In summary, MPC voted 1. To retain MPR at 11.5%, retain the asymmetric corridor of plus 100 and minus 700 basis points around the MPR, retain the CRR at 27.5%, and retain the liquidity ratio at 30%.
Meanwhile, the MPC has called on the federal government to explore the option of effective partnership with the private sector to improve funding sources necessary to address the huge infrastructural financing deficits. At its meeting on Tuesday, the committee expressed concern over the rise in public debt stock as recurrent expenditure remained relatively high compared with capital expenditure, which signals future debt servicing challenges.
Members reiterated the adverse impact of insecurity on food production, stressing that the current uptick in inflationary pressure could not be solely associated to monetary factors, but due mainly to legacy structural factors in the economy, including major supply bottlenecks across the country. The committee thus called on the government to redouble its efforts at strengthening infrastructural efficiency and address the emerging security challenges in the country. In addition to this, the committee called on the government to explore the option of effective partnership with the private sector to improve funding sources necessary to address the huge infrastructural financing deficit. The committee expressed concern over the rising public debt stock as recurrent expenditure remain relatively high compared with capital expenditure, thus signaling future debt servicing challenges. To improve government revenue sources and investment in capital, the committee called on the government to take advantage of the takeoff of the African Continental Free Trade Area (AFCFTA), which could boost domestic production and generate sizable revenues for government, as well as providing domestic productivity and competitiveness.
On the external reserves position, the committee noted that reserves, which stood at $34.94 billion as at last year November ending, increased to $36.23 billion as of January 21st, reflecting improvements in crude oil prices, and partial global economic recovery. The CBN has announced the appointment of 3 pre-shipment inspection agents (PIAs) and 2 monitoring and evaluation agents (MEAs) by the federal government for non-oil exports with effect from January 15th. A circular from the Director, CBN Trade and Exchange Department, Dr. Ozuemena Nnaji, on Tuesday to all authorized dealers, operators in the non-oil export sector, and the general public listed the pre-shipment inspection agents as Aglia International Service Limited, Neroli Technologies Limited, and Gojopa Nigeria Limited to cover designated zones of the country. The 2 monitoring and evaluation agents are FOOPS Integrated Services Limited and ACE Global Depository Nigeria Limited. The CBN has provided further clarifications to international money transfer operators (IMTOs) on modalities for payout of diaspora remittances. In a circular to that effect on Friday, the Trade and Exchange Department noted that some IMTOs and unlicensed companies had continued to facilitate diaspora remittances into the country in Naira, which ran contrary to the CBN directive that all remittances be paid to beneficiaries in dollars. The Apex Bank therefore clarified that only licensed IMTOs are permitted to carry on the business of facilitating diaspora remittances into the country, and that all diaspora remittances be received by beneficiaries in foreign currency only, by cash and/or transferred to domiciliary accounts of recipients. The central bank assured that strict sanctions shall be imposed on any individuals or institutions found contravening the guidelines, while it continues to monitor developments and issue further guidance as appropriate. The Central Bank of Nigeria has secured presidential approval to stop current plan to privatize the Nigeria Commodity Exchange and is now collaborating with the Nigeria Sovereign Investment Authority to invest at least 50 billion naira in the exchange. CBN Governor Mr. Godwin Emefiele, who disclosed this Thursday at the inaugural meeting of the steering committee set up to reposition the exchange, said the investment will be made through Infrastructure Corporation (Infraco) in a push to make the exchange functional and stop the arbitrage of middlemen. And that's the news. Welcome back. The question and answer session of the MPC press briefing on Tuesday provided CBN Governor Mr. Godwin Emefiele an opportunity to throw light on issues such as the status of the CBN Health Sector Research and Development Intervention, the establishment of Infraco, price and forex market stability, and more. Here's how the session unfolded.
The first question talks about Business Day and some other newspapers publishing a story from Fitch saying that the CBN financing of federal government was strengthening economic stability and weakening its balance sheet. Let it be known, first and foremost, that the Central Bank of Nigeria is banker to government. Second, let it be known that the Central Bank of Nigeria is a lender of last resort, not just to government, but also even to our banks when they run into short-term liquidity problems. And I'll go back because Fitch said that yes, it predated COVID-19. It is true. In 2015-2016, you all recall that there was a global crisis which resulted in a massive drop in the price of petroleum products, crude oil. Like you all know, unfortunately, Nigeria is a country that will celebrate when crude price is high, but will sneeze when the price of crude goes down. In this case, the price of crude went down, and we sneezed. We sneezed because revenue came down. When revenue came down, government became incapable to finance all its obligations. If government cannot finance all its obligations, I think it will be irresponsible on the part of the Central Bank of Nigeria as a lender of last resort not to support the federal government. The next question talks about what will the focus of the central bank be in 2021 in the midst of this pandemic. Monetary policy was very careful. Like you know, the core mandate of monetary policy is price and monetary stability as well as exchange rate stability. But given the stagflationary environment that we find ourselves today, where inflation is accelerating very fast and output growth is decelerating and contracting, monetary policy said yes, we will continue our price and monetary stability mandate, but that must be conducive to growth, because you need to see positive growth in our economy as well as inflation. They must come together. So we'll be looking more at growth, and what are some of the targeted policies we'll be looking at. Like we said, we'll be looking aggressively at what can we do to put in place measures that will stimulate consumer spending, that will ultimately also lead to more facilities for manufacturing companies to agri companies, so that this will help to create employment, stimulate manufacturing output, and positively impact on our GDP. Third question talked about the CBN by its several circulars showed that its emphasis in 2020 will be on diaspora remittance and export sector stimulation or support. You all recall that Nigeria currently, depending on the kind of priority it places on that source, has 4 sources through which we can raise revenue to support our operation, to support our obligations. 1, the price of crude, revenue from crude. 2, support from our foreign investors, whether they are portfolio or direct investors. 3, diaspora remittances. 4, export sector support. Now, before now, what we've seen is that we've only given a lot of, I'll use the word prioritization, to price of crude. When price goes up, we jubilate. When it comes down, we worry. And then 2, we have constantly been looking at, anytime there's need for money, we look at what is the direction of foreign direct investments and the rest of it. Whereas we pay less attention to diaspora remittances as well as export sector support. What we are saying is that going forward, we will give a lot more support to export sector financing at concessionary rates, so that these people and companies can generate export proceeds that would come to fund our obligations in the investors and exporters window. That's what we're saying. The next question talks about the fact that yes, we provided some support, and that an interest rate concession of 5%, and which expires in March 2021, whether we are willing to, as long as we see that there's a second wave, even in Nigeria, while we are trying to convince government not to adopt a wholesome lockdown, because that is catastrophic on everybody and the economy, we would extend by 12 months again the interest rate of 5% for CBN interventions. The next question talks about that CBN released over 4 trillion naira in special bills to the banks. Yes, what we found, yes, through our CRR policy, we found out that a lot of money had been kept in CRR and the CBN, and this was beginning to impact the liquidity ratio of the banks. And we felt that one way we can help to treat the balance sheet of the banks is to release the special bills. Those special bills have been released to the banks, and their liquidity ratios have been cured effectively. Okay, but we will not, whether we like it or not, CRR, the special bills, HOMO, and various other instruments are our own instruments of controlling instruments of monetary policy. By law, those are the instruments we have to control money supply. We have our own numbers that tells us what is the average level or optimal level of liquidity that is needed at any point in time for this economy to be stable and for us to be able to do our work. We will insist on that optimal level of liquidity. If we find any amount above that liquidity, we will suck it up, because that's our job, and we do not have any apologies for doing our work. That the CBN is doing everything possible to bring down food prices through intervention in agri. What other initiatives is CBN embarking upon to achieve price stability? I've talked about it and all that. But I think it's important for me to raise this. We have found in the market the activities of private commodity exchanges have not helped our country. And I'm going to say so very boldly. And that it is time for the Nigerian Commodity Exchange to be repositioned, to be restructured, to perform the role which by law it has been empowered to perform. We have written to the President, and luckily we have received the approval of Mr. President to restructure, reposition the Nigerian Commodity Exchange. It will operate like standard commodity exchanges that you can find in any part of the world, which includes stabilization of prices, generally, food prices, agri prices. We will be coming up with the agenda and framework for the restructuring and reposition of Nigerian Commodity Exchange. And we will do so in a manner that prices must be stable in Nigeria. Prices must be low in Nigeria. We will not allow some self-seeking private commodity exchanges to be holding products, agri products, and creating problems for prices. Because price, like you know, price stability is the core mandate of Central Bank of Nigeria. And we cannot shy away from the responsibility. Luckily, the Central Bank owns 60% of the Nigerian Commodity Exchange. We will take control of it and we will run it the way commodity exchanges are supposed to be run in any part of the world. So that's one way we're going to do work to stabilize price in Nigeria. You said that I was, in November MPC, that I was cautiously optimistic and was aggressively, I was cautiously optimistic that Nigeria, that fourth quarter GDP will be positive, thereby taking Nigeria out of recession, but that I was aggressively optimistic that during the first quarter that we will exceed recession. I'm praying very seriously that my prayers should be heard, because I know that people are waiting to put my neck on the chopping board to say that I don't know my work. But let me say this, that I'm saying this out of what we've seen. Okay? The recession or the health crisis from the pandemic and the global crisis that we've seen, right, in different countries, right, and their recovery process, we've seen a V-shaped curve. V-shaped curve. That is a big shock. Comes down and goes up. That's what we've seen. And we do not think, with what we are doing, in both monetary and fiscal authorities are doing, we do not think Nigeria will be an exception. And I can provide data for you. For instance, you will all recall that Nigeria started growing in GDP. Output was growing positively, gradually, albeit low, because as long as output is lower than population growth, we don't consider that very good. But it was growing until pandemic struck around February. Nigeria's first quarter GDP, I will use the word, was pleasantly positive, whereas those of other economies were negative, right? So Nigeria was positive in Q1, US, Britain, Europe, all of them were negative in Q1. They were negative in Q2. Nigeria hit the first contraction in Q2. Then in Q3, those economies moved up into positive territory. So Nigeria moved further down into negative territory during Q3. So we are also saying in the same direction, if they came out after 2 quarters, because it's a V, a shock, and a recovery, that we believe all things being equal, given everything that we have done, both by the monetary and fiscal authorities, we should also come out at least 4th quarter. But if we don't come out in 1st quarter, at least, that we should manage to come out during the 1st quarter. So that this, so it's good for me to explain it so that people understand my reasoning, why I felt that I was cautiously optimistic in the 4th quarter, but aggressively optimistic for the 1st quarter of 2021. NPC before now urged federal government to make relentless efforts to procure vaccines and all that, right? And what is CACOVID doing? Well, incidentally, I am one of the members of CACOVID, and you all know that CACOVID in 2020 provided a lot of support. It is no news that CACOVID was able to raise close to about 40 billion to build isolation centers in the 36 states of the Federation and Abuja. It is no news that CACOVID spent money, almost 28 billion naira, buying food, palliatives that was distributed all over the country. These are all contributions that came from responsible private sector companies, and we do appreciate them. But at this time, when the vaccines have been seen, and we're praying that we'll actually get access to those vaccines as quickly as possible. Now that there's vaccine, we know, yes, there's already donor fatigue setting in, but CACOVID has held itself out to say we will still try as much as possible to work together to see how we can task ourselves again and spend money to procure vaccines. And we are working with the various international agencies to procure vaccines. We are working as well with the relevant federal government agency, because we understand it's going to be a G2G, government-to-government negotiation for those vaccines. Lastly, that sometime last year, I informed Nigerians that Mr. President had approved the establishment of InfraCo, through which about 15 trillion will be raised to fund critical economically viable infrastructure in Nigeria, as well as the national arts sector. What is delaying? You are correct. Mr. President graciously gave approval for the establishment of InfraCo, where we think that we should be able to raise a lot of money to support governments, not only government, even private sector. The important thing is develop Nigeria infrastructure. Okay, I would say the president has played his own role to grant the approval, and what we've done since July last year is trying to put the structures in place. And I do think that in 2021, InfraCo will play a very, very active role in funding major infrastructural projects in Nigeria, and so that eases government the stress of looking for money to fund major infrastructure like roads and the rest of them, rail and the rest of them. With that, government can now focus on its job, and people can stop accusing central bank of lending to government. And the government can also focus on rural roads development. So that's the approach. And of course, the same goes for National Arts Theatre. All approvals are in place. We are hoping that in the next couple of weeks, the contract will be awarded, and National Arts Theatre, by the special grace of God, will wear a new look. And we think that the Bankers Committee, with its own money, given the approval of the President, will fund the renovation of National Arts Theatre and even build 4 structures to support the creative activities of our youth in Nigeria. And I'm sure by the special grace of God, again, in the next 2 years, and by God's grace, before Mr. President, before 2023, the president will launch a new improved National Arts Theatre complex. Thank you very much for your attention.
That's all from the CBN this week. Remember that you can also be a beneficiary of the ongoing CBN economic intervention schemes. Visit the website www.cbn.gov.ng or pay a visit to your bank for more information. Reach the CBN contact center using the phone line provided below for your valid complaints. Remember, local call rates may apply. Send to us your comments and contributions using the email address fromthecbn@gmail.com. Follow us on the social media for updates and uploaded episodes of the program. I am William Dada. Stay safe and bye for now.